I still remember the smell of old tobacco and polish when I first unwrapped my birthday present, my grandfather's second-hand brass telescope. It was my 16th birthday, and it felt like the sky had opened before me, inviting me to explore the cosmos. Late that night, once the moon rose high and the rest of my family slept, I set up the telescope by my bedroom window. I was filled with excitement, imagining uncharted galaxies and worlds teeming with unknown life. That excitement, however, quickly turned to dread the moment I caught sight of a barn owl perched in a nearby tree. It watched me with unblinking silver eyes that glowed in the moonlight. A cold shiver rippled through me. I told myself it was just a bird, but a gnawing unease lingered in the pit of my stomach. I closed the telescope and shut my curtains, hoping to put the whole eerie moment out of my mind. But over the next few nights, I found myself on edge whenever darkness arrived. I did my best to avoid looking outside, diving into my phone or online horror stories, anything to distract me from that inexplicable fear. I tried laughing it off. It's just an owl, I told myself. Owls come out at night, no big deal. Yet a heaviness settled over me, and I became too nervous to even glance at my window. A few days later, I woke up with a sickening jolt in my stomach. This time, something about my sleep felt off. It was as if I had dreamed of being in a strange sterile room. I remembered lying on a cold surface, bright white lights shining all around me, and a whirring mechanical sound that hammered in my skull. But the details were half-formed, like I was only allowed to recall flashes, enough to scare me but never enough to confirm what truly happened. My heart pounded as I reached for my phone to check the time. Eventually, I worked up the courage to peer toward my window. Sure enough, that barn owl was perched on the sill, staring at me with an intensity that made my insides twist. I had no idea why its presence unnerved me so much, but I couldn't shake the sensation that it was more than just a bird. As nights blurred together, that feeling of dread only deepened. I began to skip dinner and barely paid attention in class, consumed by the question of whether something truly bizarre was happening to me. My teachers would ask why I looked so pale and tired, and my friends teased me that maybe I was practicing for some haunted house job. But I couldn't laugh it off anymore. Those dreams, or whatever they were, kept returning, each more vivid than the last. I'd see shapes bending over me, strange silhouettes backlit by glaring lights. I'd hear a thin, piercing noise that felt like it was drilling into my mind. Then I'd wake up, sweating profusely and gasping for air. And always, the barn owl would be watching, as if waiting for me to piece the puzzle together. One night was particularly disturbing. I woke up screaming, and I had no idea how long I'd been in bed. My feet felt damp and filthy. My pajamas were streaked with mud around the ankles, and I noticed small cuts that dotted my legs. My body vibrated with leftover panic, as if I had just escaped a nightmare that followed me into reality. The residue of that blinding white light still lingered in my vision like an after-image when you stare at the sun too long. And of course the owl was there at the window. It felt like it had witnessed the whole thing. I was too rattled to go back to sleep, so I sat up, knees pulled tight to my chest, until morning. Only when the sun started to rise did the owl vanish, leaving me unsure if I should be relieved or more afraid. Eventually, I found something in our attic that hinted I wasn't the first one in my family to experience this. While searching for old photo albums, I discovered my grandfather's dusty journal. The entries were in shaky cursive, full of frantic notes about blinding lights and shadowy visitors. One particular line jolted me. I see the owl each night, but it's only a mask. There's something behind those eyes, something not of this world. I slammed the diary shut, heart pounding. My grandfather had gone through this too? Was that why he gave me the telescope? Some sort of cryptic warning? My fear, turned to obsession. Late at night, I combed through online forums about UFO encounters. I read post after post from people describing abductions, missing time, unexplained scars, and yes, owls that appeared right before or after an encounter. Many people believed these owls could be screen memories, illusions implanted by whatever was taking them. The more I read, the sicker I felt, because these stories mirrored my own experiences almost exactly. I found a morbid comfort in realizing I wasn't alone, but it also crystallized my worst fear, that this might all be real. Life around me went on, oblivious to my internal turmoil. My parents complained that I was distant. My grades tanked, and my teachers warned me I'd end up in summer school if I didn't improve. At night, though, I couldn't concentrate on homework or anything else. The nightmares now felt like half-remembered events rather than fiction. Once, in a dream, I tried to thrash my arms to break free from something cold and metallic around my wrists. When I woke up, I swore my wrist had a faint bruise that looked like a handprint, but with elongated fingers. By lunchtime that day, the bruise had vanished completely, leaving me dazed. Part of me wished whoever, whatever, was doing this would just show themselves in broad daylight, so I'd know that my sanity hadn't abandoned me. Things escalated on a stormy October night. Rain lashed my windows, and wind howled around the corners of the house. I was so exhausted that my eyes stung, but I refused to sleep. I left every light in my room on, hoping that somehow bright light would protect me. Then the power cut out. A crash of thunder rumbled over the neighborhood, and in the darkness, all I could see was the jagged lightning outside. My heart was in my throat as I inched toward the window with my flashlight. That's when I saw the barn owl huddled on a branch just outside, staring in at me. It was illuminated by every flash of lightning, its face ghostly white and its pupils reflecting like tiny mirrors. My breath caught. Behind the owl, for just a moment in the strobe-like flashes, I glimpsed a taller figure with an elongated shape. Then the flash ended and there was nothing there. I nearly dropped the flashlight, stumbling back to my bed, half convinced something would break through my window at any second. I curled up, pressing my back to the wall. The next thing I recall is opening my eyes to find it was nearly dawn, the storm long gone. My ankles and wrists were throbbing, though I found no obvious bruises or marks. My flashlight lay drained of batteries on the floor. A dull terror settled in my gut, like I was tiptoeing on the razor's edge of an impossible truth. At my breaking point, I finally told my mum everything. I described the dreams, how I'd wake up disoriented, muddy, or bruised. I told her about the owl, how it always seemed to appear when I felt I was being taken. The worried look in her eyes deepened, but I could see she wasn't sure whether to believe me or write it off as anxiety. When I mentioned aliens, her expression shifted from concern to that polite sort of disbelief reserved for supernatural claims. She urged me to visit a counselor, but something in her gaze hinted that I might have awakened a half-buried memory of her own. Regardless, off to the doctor I went. Sleep studies, MRIs, more checkups. They found nothing. Desperation led me to a plan. I would set up a camera in my room to record any strange occurrences. If something truly was happening, I wanted proof, for my own sanity, if nothing else. I angled my phone on the dresser, pointed at my bed, and hit record. Despite my terror, I was so exhausted that sleep eventually overcame me. And with sleep came yet another nightmare. I lay on a frigid metallic table, immobilized, bright lights drilling into my eyes, mechanical hisses all around. I sensed something pricking my arm like a needle. Shadows loomed above me, tall and spindly. I tried to scream, and that's when I woke up, gasping, drenched in sweat. My room was dark except for the pale moonlight. Guess who was at the window? The barn owl, of course, eyes reflecting the moon. I rushed to stop the recording, my hands trembling. I plugged the camera into my computer the next morning to review the footage. At first I saw myself tossing and turning. Then at about 3:17 a.m., the screen flickered. For several seconds the image glitched into static. When it cleared, I was gone from the bed. 10 silent seconds passed. No me, no movement, before I suddenly reappeared, writhing as if in agony. A few seconds later, I bolted upright in bed and glanced around in a panic. My entire body turned to ice. That footage was impossible to explain. I stared at it, tears running down my face before I even realized I was crying. I showed the video to a couple of friends. Predictably, rumors spread that I was some freak or that I had doctored the footage. My mom just hovered in an anxious silence, unsure how to handle the evidence. Another round of doctor appointments and tests proved useless. Meanwhile, the barn owl kept appearing every night, never missing a chance to watch me from the window. I placed more cameras, tried different angles, but each recording ended the same way. A glitch in the footage, a few seconds of missing time, and me returning to bed in distress. Some nights, I found myself imagining sprinting to a church or a police station, anywhere I might find protection from whatever was happening. But deep down, I knew that locked doors and prayers might not deter visitors from somewhere beyond Earth. The stars mocked me every time I looked at them. I couldn't even appreciate the beauty of the night sky anymore. All I could see was a vast darkness that might hide unimaginable beings. The owl's eyes, reflecting starlight, felt like a portal to horrors I couldn't face, yet I couldn't escape them either. One evening, after pacing my room for what felt like hours, I found the courage to stand at my window and confront the creature. Sure enough, the owl perched on a branch a few feet away. My breath caught in my throat, but I opened the window anyway. The wind howled, cold and sharp against my skin. The barn owl flapped its wings, but didn't leave. It just stared unblinking, with a round, pale face that seemed to glow in the moonlight. "What do you want from me?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. I half expected the owl to vanish or to speak. Instead, it blinked slowly, twisting its head at an eerie angle. Thunder rumbled somewhere in the distance. For just a second I thought I saw a much taller shape behind it, some impossibly elongated figure blending in with the shadows of the trees. Lightning flashed and then everything went dark again. I slammed the window shut, stumbling back into my room, heart rattling against my ribs. My skin prickled with dread, and a voice in my head told me that no matter how hard I tried to push it away, this was happening. The next morning, I woke with the all too familiar sense that something had occurred while I slept. My camera, once again, was turned at a strange angle, batteries near depletion, and in the center of my bedroom floor lay a single feather, greyish-white with faint spots. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I picked it up, trembling, not sure if it was from the owl or something else. When I glanced at the window, I caught a flicker of movement, like a shadow darting away. I couldn't stop the wave of nausea that hit me. Every night I fought sleep, and every morning I woke to more inexplicable evidence. For a while, I just stood there in my room, feather in hand, torn between wanting to pretend none of this was real, and knowing I'd already stepped too far into the darkness to ever go back. My rational mind argued that all of it could be some bizarre psychological breakdown, but the camera footage refused to lie. The bruises, the muddy feet, the fear lodged in my gut every time that owl stared at me. None of that could be explained away by a bad dream. And so here I am, wrestling each day with a question that gnaws at me. Is it worse to learn that these abductions are real, or to face the possibility that I've slipped into madness? Every time the sun sets, my insides roil with anxiety, because I know the barn owl will return, and maybe those other visitors with it. Night after night, I lie in bed, still hoping that I'll find some miraculous escape. But I suspect I'm only at the beginning of this dark journey. Whatever is behind those gleaming avian eyes, it's not finished with me, not by a long shot. And somewhere in the blackness beyond my window, in the vast labyrinth of stars, is a truth I'm both desperate and terrified to uncover. I don't know where this will lead me, whether to final proof of these intruders' existence or to my own permanent descent into fear and paranoia. But every morning, when I manage to open my eyes and face a new day, I realize that my life may never be the same again. Because once you've seen those eyes at the window, once you've felt their presence tug at your very soul, you know there's nowhere left to hide. And in that sense, the most unsettling part is knowing that they and the ever-present barn owl can come back anytime they want. And no matter what I do, I can't stop them.